All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 9, the Sports and Nothing Else podcast. This is a very special episode because Kyle is in Florida.
It's warm here.
It's warm here. It's actually beautiful, though. It's been very hot, and it's now beautiful. And our dad is in Iowa and is on this one this week, so we're very excited. How's it going, Dad?
It's going great. I worked like a dog today, though.
Yeah,
helped the family from church landscape from 7 in the morning till an hour ago. So every bone in my body aches.
Yeah, we played putt-putt golf today, we also had a
so you guys are probably equally as sore, I'm sure.
Yeah, Kyle smoked me, actually. Yeah, we did see some gators because they have them at the golf course that you've been to. And Kate taught us a new technique today where you get to the hole, you walk down to see where the hole is, you put your ball down about 3 inches from the hole and you knock it in.
It's like the reverse gimme.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's how she played today.
Well,
hey. Very proud.
She's strategic. That's good.
Yeah, strategic. Learned that from George W. himself.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. So if you were wondering why we didn't do a podcast last week, it's because we got a double episode coming this week. So today is our top 10 NBA players of all time. And Thursday, we will be doing an NBA playoffs preview. So it's all NBA this week. If you don't like the NBA, first of all, what's wrong with you? Second of all, it's not going to be a good week for you at all. So tonight, Dad is going to bless us with a family fiasco and I think some recommendations and a thing he hates. But I can tell you that neither of us are prepared for that segment. So we'll let his stand alone tonight and we'll add one on Thursday. So here's how this is going to work. Behind me, it's weird because it's mirrored and I don't know how to make my fingers go where it's supposed to go. But behind me is a wall with 1 through 10 and our names on it. And we're going to start at number 10, our 10th best NBA player of all time, and go up. We'll kind of argue as we go and then circle around to arguments at the end. So we have some obvious names of people who you would expect to maybe show up on a top 10 list. Like here's LeBron, Kareem, J.R. Smith, these kind of guys. So,
how did you know I had him on my list?
Oh, we're pretty smart people.
Yeah,
and then we've got some guys that who knows, like Big Aristotle, sneaky possible guy, but I don't think he's going to be on any of our lists. And then the guys who people could have really high or really not, depending on what you value in basketball and how much you care about stats. So we're going to let Dad go first because he's our guest on the podcast today, and he's also the one that was alive for some of these guys that Kyle and I basically have no chance on knowing much about them except reading books and watching YouTube. So, Dad, who's your number 10 guy?
Well, I did this in kind of a unique way. I kind of have 4 pairs of guys.
That's only 8, though.
And 2 singles.
Okay.
So I have a pair of centers.
Like my high school experience. That was the single. All right, go ahead.
I have a pair of centers as my 10 and 9.
All right, why don't you just give them both to us?
And they are in this order: number 10 being Wilt.
Okay.
And number 9 being Shaq.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. I mean, as I looked at centers, and I have 4 centers on my list. The reason they are 10 and 9 is because they became a liability at the end of games. Here you have your big guys who you want to get the ball to close to the basket late in games, and they both shot less than 55% from the free throw line. And the other thing with Wilt, I mean, he was kind of that first really big center, and he played against guys that were so much smaller than him. And so I think that his stats are unbelievable, but I think he was a man among boys, So that's why I have them down on my list. The main thing is the free throw thing.
All right, perfect. Well, Kyle, why don't you give us number 10, and then I will give number 10, and we'll both give our 9s, and that'll bring it back to you then. So go ahead with number 10.
Okay, so I made a last-minute change. I've actually got Hakeem at number 10. I don't have a ton of analysis here other than that the career was fantastic. one of the better defensive centers of all time. 2.6 MVP shares, which I found to be one of the best stats as far as populating this list for people I've never really watched before. And then the two finals wins.
Can you explain that stat to us, please?
So MVP shares would essentially be your top 3 MVP votes. You get points based on where you finished in that. To me, that combined with all NBA is going to be your best determiner of your strength of resume within your era. So if you were considered one of the best 3 players at either your position with the all NBA votes or the MVP vote, to me that has quite a bit of sway. So Hakeem just jumped in there. Oscar Robertson is who I also debated for this spot.
A little more on Hakeem because I actually have him 11th. 6 first-team All-NBA, 2 seconds, 3 thirds in an era where you had Ewing, Robinson, Shaq. It's a golden age for centers. So 2 Finals MVPs, 2 championships, 2 Defensive Player of the Year, and 1 MVP. He played in an era of his prime where Michael Jordan pretty much won all of the MVPs. So it's hard to fault people for not having MVPs there. So my number 10 is Shaq.
I gotcha.
You got me. Shaq is my number 10. I'm just going to do my number 9.
Okay.
I had Shaq at number 9 earlier, and then I bumped Kobe ahead of him, which I broke my heart because I can't stand Kobe. But it's hard to argue against the entire resume. So I have Shaq at 10, and I'll just go ahead and go 9 with Kobe. Kobe, listen to this. He did not elevate a teammate, I think, in any season of any that he played in. I want to talk about him when we get to LeBron because people compare the two a lot. But 12-time All-Defense, 5-time champs, 2-time Finals MVP, 1 MVP, 11 first-team All-NBAs. It's the longevity for him that bumps him up past Shaq. Shaq was a really good player for like 10 years-ish. Kobe was a really good player for like 15. He's second all-time in points, I believe. No, like 4th or 5th. Here's my problem with him, and we'll get to I want to get to this later when we talk about Duncan and LeBron. The raw stats are incredible. He played through a lot of injuries. But when given bad teams, his teams were really bad. And most of these guys that are on this list, you put them on a bad team and they make the playoffs. Kobe went on a bad team and shot the ball 50 times a game and pouted and was miserable. So miserable that his coach quit and wrote a book that obliterated him in the book. So it's one of those things. He died and then immediately he became a top 5 player when he was never at any point considered one before that. He won 1 MVP in an era where the NBA was not super talented. And he was only the best player on 2 finals teams, 2 finals winning teams, whereas Shaq was the best player on 3. Duncan was the best player on 5. So that's why I have Kobe at 9. There'll be lots of people that get real angry about this, and they'll have to deal with it. Go ahead.
So, as you know, one of the things that kept Kobe off my list, he's not on my list at all. And the thing that did it for me is as I was looking at statistics, you know, scoring is important, but the thing that for Kobe that kept him off my list is it took him so many more shots to score his points. Mm-hmm. His shooting percentage was 4 or 5
44
percentage points less than anybody else that's on my list.
Yes.
And so also his rebound and assist statistics were not at the same level of the other guys too. So, you know, although I think Kobe was one of those guys that, you know, he reminds me a little of Steph Curry. When he was on, he was unstoppable. But he wasn't a consistent player.
Yep.
When he was off, he could go 3 for 20, you know, and he kept shooting.
Yes.
Because he didn't help his team any other way, really. So that's what kept him. And I went back and forth on that one, but yeah, that's what kept him off for me.
there's some great advanced metrics, value over replacement player, which is basically WAR in baseball, and win shares, which is basically how many wins you helped your team accrue. And he's not in the top 10 of either. And I think that's pretty remarkable considering how many years he played. There's also PER, player efficiency rating, and he is not anywhere near the top 10 on that either, because he wasn't an efficient player. And there's a reason I would never rate him above Tim Duncan. It's because Tim Duncan raised the level of everyone on his team, and Kobe said it's my way or the highway. And when he didn't have a good team, that meant that they were going to be brutal. And they were for a few years there in between having Shaq and having Pau Gasol, who basically saved Kobe's career in a lot of ways. So there we go.
All right, am I doing my 9?
Yeah.
So we're just going to dump back on Kobe. So I went back and forth between Kobe and Shaq for this spot. Ultimately, even though I think Shaq's peak was better, had Shaq gave a crap, he's in the top 3 all time, I think. If Shaq's in shape for 15 years instead of none,
so true.
He's arguably the most dominant player that I've ever watched in my generation. Now, most of my generation would put Kobe in the top 3. I am not in agreement with that.
We were there. We watched the games.
And I think the big difference between the 3 of us and most people that I've looked at as far as looking at Reddit and our NBA, which is my favorite.
He doesn't know what those
I know you don't
are.
know what those are, but it's like a discussion
I've heard of them.
for the NBA. It's the greatest one of all time. I love it. There's a lot of morons on there. And there's a lot of morons on here. But the biggest thing to me is that I mean, Kobe with 5 NBA finals, 15 all NBAs. I know he was a selfish player, but really inspired an entire generation of basketball players wanted to be selfish as well. But still a lot of greatness there. So I snuck him in at 9. Don't feel great about it. That's all I got.
Well, and we should say this for Shaq, who, yes, was an absolute liability at the end of games. Those 3 finals, it wasn't like close who was the best player on the Lakers. Shaq demolished those 3 teams. He would have routinely 38 and 20. I mean, it was impossible to consider stopping him because those were his 3 or 4 best seasons, those Lakers years. And his peak is we're going to get to Larry Bird on this too. Shaq's peak is definitely greater than Kobe. The problem is he would show up out of shape for the season all the time. And Kobe was a killer, which was both harmful and helpful to his team.
Well, and the other thing with Kobe is we're in the generation of I follow sports but don't actually watch any of the games. I watch some highlights and I follow things on Twitter, and Kobe was the ultimate highlight. I mean, you'd see some of the shots that he made. He looks exactly like Jordan. Yes. He emulated Jordan. And if all you're going to do is watch those shots and not realize that he didn't pass to Robert Horry, who's standing wide open in the corner, or Derek Fisher or anyone else, he's going to look like the greatest player of all time. But if you actually watch the games, there are some lows there. But
and the clutch stats bear it out that everyone thinks Kobe's one of the most clutch players that's ever played.
He just took more clutch shots.
Field goal percentages are not there. They're not close to Jordan. They're not close to LeBron. They're not close to those Spurs teams that move the ball around. Every defense knew exactly what was going to happen. The ball's going to be passed to Kobe. He's going to dribble a few times and shoot a terrible fadeaway. And when they went in, it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. But a lot of them didn't.
Yeah. So one more thing about going back to Shaq, since we've talked a lot about Shaq with Kobe. The other thing that I remember from early in Shaq's career, and I would say the same thing about Jordan, because clearly I got to see those guys much more than you guys did early on. And there were a different set of rules for those 2 guys. I mean, Shaq was he was humongous, and he could just lower his shoulder and just knock people towards the basket, and the officials would never call it. If he was playing today, he would be forced to take 10-foot jumpers, which he could not make. And so the same was true with Jordan. I can remember he would drive to the basket, and officials would just blow the whistle because, they both played at a time when the NBA needed them to succeed. And so, that's just my one big knock on Shaq. He just got away with stuff that I don't think other guys did. And so he never developed the skills that other centers did, from my opinion.
You could also argue the reverse of that, though. The guy was so dang big that it never looked like he got fouled, even though people are just
that's true too.
I mean, I could punch Shaq as hard as I possibly could while
Nothing would happen.
playing defense, and he would think a fly just maybe nicked him a little bit. So,
well, and honestly, Kyle, it's a little bit like playing basketball against you because you're so stinking big and strong that you're immovable. You're an immovable object on the basketball court.
Well, and the same exact concept. If you make me shoot a 10-footer, it doesn't matter.
I actually have it's an interesting. I have a boy in the basketball league I run who is like the Shaq of our league. He doesn't play like Shaq, but he's way bigger and stronger than everyone else, and also faster. And we officiate him totally different than any of the other kids because otherwise, A, he would kill people, and B, he can absorb more contact, and it may not be fair, but it's like he gets fouled every time he touches the ball, basically, when he goes to the basket, but he also gives out his share of punishment, which is like a source of panic for me every week. So I understand the conundrum the officials found themselves in. But anyhow, that's actually true of LeBron, too. We'll get to that probably in a little bit. All right, Dad, give us number 8.
Okay, number 8, I have another pair. And it's Tim Duncan and Hakeem Olajuwon.
Okay.
2 comments about those guys, and I actually have Olajuwon ahead of Duncan. But first of all, with Tim Duncan, to me, what set him apart is he played at a pace, and he forced everyone to play at his pace, and he could get up and down the floor, but for the most part, he forced teams to play defense. And I don't think NBA players like that. And he also was a tremendous passer for a big guy and just made the game look so effortless. Not spectacular, but just got it done. And I think the other thing that sets Tim Duncan apart is I just think he was a great teammate. I think his fellow teammates really loved him. With Hakeem, the thing that puts him above Wilt and Shaq for me is a couple things. First of all, he put constant pressure on other centers because he ran the floor so well. He was such an athlete. And so as an opposing center, you would get wore down at the end of games because you had to try and keep up with Hakeem running up and down the floor. I think he was head to head, he was better than Shaq. He was a good free throw shooter for a big guy, and the blocks just stand out. To me, Olajuwon just got off the floor so quick. I mean, he would block shots that you would think, well, there's no way he's going to block this shot, and just boom, just like that. So he was, I think, the most athletic center that ever played, and he also could have played a power forward. Because he could shoot a little bit. And I think, if there would have been more emphasis on the 3-point line, I think he would have shot some of those and probably raised his scoring average because centers couldn't guard him out away from the basket. They didn't even try because he would just blow right by him. So that's what separates him for me from, for instance, Wilt and Shaq. So.
All right. Why don't you go with 8?
You would do 7 and 8 because they've both been done already.
Yeah, and my 7 and 8 are the same as yours, just in opposite order. So you give 8 and 7.
So number 8, I got Wilt Chamberlain, and
You changed it on me.
I did change it.
Never mind. All right, the same. Are exactly the same.
All right, I got Wilt, and we kind of talked about this week. I mean, the stats are truly insane, and this is honestly the first time I've ever gone back and looked at his numbers on a yearly basis. I mean, he averaged 30.1 and 22.9 rebounds per game throughout the career, which is just astounding. But like you mentioned earlier, he was like 5 inches taller than anyone that was ever guarding him on a regular basis. So you put him in today's game, he's a guy. Name a mediocre center that can't really shoot, that can't shoot free throws at all. I mean, we have a million of those now. And in fact, we've got Boban Bogdanovic, who's 7'6" and doesn't even play. Or not Bogdanovic, whatever his name actually is. Marjanovic.
Yeah.
Boban. I mean, seriously, think if that guy played back in the 1950s, he would have been
87 points a game.
A foot and a half bigger than anybody that was guarding him. He probably would have actually scored 100 points.
But here's the thing. Here's the one thing I'll say about Wilt. At one point, he got accused of just being a scorer, that he was a ball hog. And so the next year he led the league in assists.
Yeah, but to the detriment of his team if you do any research on that.
Well, I understand that, but you also, it's hard to know how good Wilt could have been.
Yeah.
To me, he's a little like, not the injury thing, but with Mickey Mantle, he just didn't take care of himself and was kind of a runaround and
known to carouse a little bit with the ladies.
Yeah. And so, you just don't know. You don't know if he would have worked at some other things. But again, he didn't have to, because he just catch the ball and dunk it every time. Now, here's an interesting thing. Did you guys know that he's the guy who changed the free throw rule? Because he used to step back and dunk his free throws, because he crossed the line before the ball hit the rim. So he would just take about 3 steps and just go up and dunk it from the free throw line.
So that's amazing. Also, here's a question for you for someone that doesn't know that era at all. So looking back at his stats.
He's even too old for that.
I know, but you're still going to be more knowledgeable than I am.
You're not old enough.
So looking back and comparing him and Russell, I mean, obviously the winning is the big difference there. But, I mean, did Wilt average so many points and so many fewer assists and win less because he didn't have teammates, a.k.a. like an Allen Iverson, where he just did whatever he wanted? Or
the best player, until he went to the Lakers late in his career, the best player that Wilt played with was a guy named Hal Greer. You heard of Hal Greer?
Mm-hmm. Heard the name. Couldn't tell you a single thing about him. Rusty Greer's dad?
Not quite. So Hal Greer, who would Hal Greer be as good as now? I can't even think of it. He was very mediocre. So no, Wilt, and again, I think one of the reasons Wilt never played with anybody any good is because nobody wanted to play with him.
Yeah.
He just wasn't a nice guy. So anyway.
All right. Well, since I have Wilt 8 and Duncan 7, I wanted to go over some stats with those guys. Wilt, you can look at the points per game and rebounds. He's kind of like the Sandy Koufax of basketball, besides the postseason or success, where for a stretch of time, it's not even like close with points and rebounds and all of that. I mean, except Russell was rebounding at the same level. 4-time MVP, 2-time champion, 1-time finals MVP, 7 first-team All-NBAs, 3 seconds. Here's the deal. He had one peer, only one peer, who obviously was on better teams, but he never could beat Bill Russell, ever. And that goes back to this thing we're talking about, where it depends how you view basketball. Do you want to win, or do you want to rack up stats? And I'm more of the mindset, I like people who really, really want to win. Like Tim Duncan could have averaged 27, 28 points for his career. He averaged 20. His team's won 5 titles. He won with a whole bunch of different guys. And those guys all still love each other. Kobe and Shaq, well, we all know how that ended. So that's Wilt. He's unbelievably talented. We all know this. But we've all played with people who are unbelievably talented that weren't winning players. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And as people who kind of grinded, that matters to me. Here's Duncan. By the way, Duncan, there's this idea that his stats don't add up, but here you go. 5-time champ. He was the best player on 5 championship teams. Kobe was the best player on 2. Shaq was the best player on 3. Wilt was the best player on 2 because that's all he won. 15-time All-Defense. 3 times Finals MVP. 2-time regular MVP. 10 first teams. 3 seconds and 2 thirds. Now, this is important. The forwards during Duncan's era were the best part of the NBA. This is Garnett, Chris Webber, Tracy McGrady, and there's more guys that kind of came and went. Amare, Dirk, yeah, who should have been mentioned first on that list. Mm-hmm. The guards, it was Kobe and Iverson and Nash, basically, in a rotating, and Jason Kidd, who should definitely be mentioned.
Kevin Johnson.
KJ, BJ Armstrong, guys like that. Richard Dumas. And Charles Barkley was also a forward.
Bugsy Bogues.
Yeah. Sean Bradley. Not a guard.
Wait,
We're starting to name guys from Space Jam now. Point is this.
Tasmanian Devil.
To do first team NBA 10 times during that era is unbelievable, considering the guys that he was going against. So we say Garnett because that's a very important one. And so to me, he went to the playoffs every year he was in the league. And there were some of those teams, those Spurs teams, everybody thinks like, oh, they had all those Hall of Famers. They had Parker, they had Ginobili. First of all, Parker and Ginobili, if you stick them on some random team that doesn't have Tim Duncan, they're not Hall of Famers. They're not. It's not happening. And there are some of those teams that are pretty bad when those guys are pretty young, you would think, but they have Tim Duncan, and so they won 50-some games anyways. Again, Kobe had those years where his roster looked bad, and they won 32 games. LeBron had years. You look at a couple of the teams LeBron took to the finals, and you go, oh, that's the worst team in the NBA, and they have LeBron, and they went to the finals. It's outrageous. So you have these guys that get stats, and you have these guys that raise their team. And I'll take the guys that raise their team if everything else is fairly similar. So that's why Duncan goes above Wilt. It's why he goes above Kobe. It's why he goes above Shaq. And did it for a really long time. So that's that. Also, he's a good guy as opposed to some of those other guys. Not that should matter in this list, but.
The only thing I had to add on Duncan, he played until he was 40, never had a losing season.
Not one.
Basically, again, the anti-Kobe in that he lifted everyone up.
He won the College Player of the Year a couple times too. I mean, he played 4 years at Wake and then came out. And so if you add 4 years onto his statistical resume, which Kobe gets, it's really something. So both him and Kobe get the great privilege of playing for outstanding coaches, which should be mentioned. That matters. Duncan probably isn't the same without Popovich. Kobe probably isn't the same without Phil Jackson.
So, Jesse, one thing you said that Wilt was the best player on 2 championship teams. Is that what you said?
Well, sure. I mean, I was like negative 25 when that happened, so maybe I'm wrong.
He wasn't.
Was Jerry West on one of those teams?
Jerry West was on those teams.
Okay.
And you know, the more I looked at Jerry West, and it's hard not to put him on this list. I didn't, but people don't think about Jerry West when they think about the
I
top.
Considered him also, but
the guy was phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, he's the only guy that won the MVP of the finals without winning the finals. So,
and hit a 68-foot shot to win a game in that final.
Pretty good. That'll work. All right, we got to keep moving, or else this is gonna be like a 30-hour-long podcast.
Okay.
I finally got Kyle watching Ted Lasso now, so we got to finish it before he leaves. All right, Dad, who you got for number 6?
I have got Oscar Robertson at number 6.
Whoa, high.
Yes, and here's why. He was by far the best player of his era. Averaged a triple-double. And I know Westbrook, is it Michael? Not Michael Westbrook. Russell Westbrook has done it, but don't try and compare those two.
We're not.
What?
We're not. This is not a podcast that's a big fan of Russell Westbrook.
Oscar
Robertson.
Oscar Robertson was a point guard and scored like that. The other thing is he didn't play with a 3-point line. So imagine what his stats would be if he would have taken a half a dozen 3-pointers a game. And the other thing is Lou Alcindor, Kareem, was in the league several years and couldn't win anything. And the Bucks signed Oscar Robertson late in his career, and they won a championship. And it was because Oscar was that good. Again, you watch video of Oscar, and he doesn't look like he was fast or anything like that, but he was just a very physical player, really strong, just an outstanding player. So, and again, he didn't play on great teams for the most part, but pretty phenomenal.
All right. Well, that's going to be one where A, neither of us can refute anything you say because we weren't even close to alive, and B, neither of us have him in our top 10, but it's not because we really know what to do with him, probably. is the truth.
And he is on my list of maybes, which I do want to go through when we're done with this. I've got a nice little paragraph of guys that either I didn't know enough about or just missed the cut. So,
yeah.
I think one of the reasons why Oscar Robertson doesn't get his due is because he's a very surly individual.
He's a grouch. He thinks all the new guys are terrible. He'll let you know about it.
He's kind of the Willie Mays of basketball, just an angry guy.
All right, you keeping your number 6?
Yeah.
Okay, this is who Kyle and I have for number 6, both of us.
Whoa.
So we're gonna make I'll leave some of the statistics for you with him. And this is where it gets hard with him, because you're looking at peaks again and the very tip top of somebody, and he's probably higher on this list. He contracts HIV. It really messes with the end of his career. And so a couple of guys I have ahead of him, it's more like lifetime. It's like the Hank Aaron versus Mickey Mantle, or Hank Aaron versus, I don't know, name somebody who was like a supernova but doesn't have 755 home runs. Magic and Bird to me are kind of interchangeable on this list. They saved basketball essentially in the 80s. They were the only teams that mattered in the 80s until the Pistons right at the end. And they're both guys that every year made first team All-NBA. And basically it was those two for MVP for like 8 years in a row. I got to I was watching some old Jordan games, and part of that was Magic was in there, and it's unbelievable. I mean, that's the guy you want to play with. There's not many people on this list you'd rather play with than Magic Johnson. I won't do all the stats yet because I know you're going to have him higher on the list. And part of this always happens. It's hard to compare people across eras, and that's your era. And some of the guys coming up on our list are our era. Mm-hmm. And so we always value those people higher. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, if we were doing this 3 years from now, Steph Curry is probably on my list. And KD and Kevin Durant almost will have to be.
Chris Paul.
And maybe, I don't know. But the point is, I know you made a face with us having Magic at 6, and that's reasonable, because you're probably going to have him at 2 or 3, I'm guessing. But
I'm just going to give a disclaimer before we get to the top 5, because this is where, for me, it got very subjective. And you guys are going to have a cow when I give you 4 and 5. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's because I don't like them.
It's a biased list.
I'm going to disagree with everybody, but I also am aware that this it's because I just don't like the next 2 guys. I'm going to tell you, so that's part of it.
Well, and I have Magic here too as well. And to me, the biggest thing, and I'm guessing you're going to have LeBron coming up here with one of your next 2 picks, but everybody compares LeBron to Jordan. To me, this is the prototype. Is Magic Johnson is what LeBron is today.
Just 10 more years of Magic Johnson.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just the pure dominance physically, and then the passing to me is what really stuck out. I mean, the 5.6 MVP shares is way up there on that list. And I mean, obviously the best player of his era. I would argue that Bird is the best talent of that era, just was a much shorter period of time. And I have Bird above him just because of how great he could be with proper medical care and not drinking beer and gunning heaters in the off season and doing some pavement on the yard, on the driveway. So yeah, I don't remember a ton of watching Magic Johnson, but the stats they speak for themselves, obviously.
And he's one of those guys. It's intangibles too. You can't just look at his stats. He's another guy that like put those guys on his team, and all of a sudden they're all stars. James Worthy. If you just send him to some other team to see a Hall of Famer, I don't know, maybe, but it certainly didn't hurt that he played with Magic Johnson. So anyhow, and again, you have to factor in the fact that legit him and Larry Bird saved basketball. They really did. and that matters. So, all right, we'll let you get going here on some of the guys you hate. So give us number 5.
Well, I know that nobody else would ever dream of having these guys 4 and 5. I get it, but I have Jordan number 5. I think Michael Jordan was the most spectacular player to ever play the game. I think a highlight reel of him is just unbelievable. But for me, what your teammates think of you is very important. And I don't think many of his teammates liked him. And he also was drunk giving his Hall of Fame speech and threw everybody, even his son, under the bus. I don't have any respect for Michael Jordan as a human being. And so, was he a great player? And does everybody else have him number 1? Yes. But if I was putting a team together, the 4 guys that I'm going to have above him, I would take ahead of him just because they were just better teammates. Again, this is another pair. So I have him and James right together. And the reason I have LeBron ahead of Michael Jordan is because I think LeBron James right now would be the best player at every position if he wanted to be. He can play point guard, he can play off guard, he can play small forward, he can play big forward, and there's no center in the league that could guard him. I just think we haven't seen anybody as big and strong and as fast. I also think LeBron James could be an all NFL tight end too. He's just that kind of athlete. But this is my knock on LeBron. LeBron chased championships. He didn't just stay in one place and say, you know what, I'm going to make this team great. And part of it is he played for Cleveland. That's tough, but he
make that team great, and they had no one.
I'll give you that. But he went to Miami and he won a few, and then he came back to Cleveland, and then he went here. I like guys that are loyal to a team and to a city, and he hasn't been that to me. When I look at his stats, he probably is the greatest player of all time when it's all said and done. There's probably not even any question about that, in my opinion. But again, this is where, for me, it gets a little subjective, and it's like, boy, these guys are all really good. And then I also hear guys like Reggie Miller say, LeBron, Bird, I'm taking Bird, So anyway, there you go. There's my totally subjective 5 and 4.
Well, listen, if I didn't know you, we would be arguing for a while here. I mean, Michael Jordan's, sure, I'll accept all of your thoughts. He was the best player for legit 12 years in a row. He won 5 MVPs and 3 runner-ups, and the 2 of those runner-ups are hilarious because they just didn't want to vote for him, which is going to happen to Giannis this year. 6 Finals MVPs, 9 all-defensive first teams, not just all defensive teams, first teams. 10
but he never beat the Celtics when Bird was in his prime.
Yeah, because he was the only guy on his team who were an all-star team. That's a stupid argument.
Here's the other reason why I did this, because I knew it would get you guys all fired up.
But it's because, if you had put him 3, we could have had a talk about it. But 5 is not even it discredits your whole list. It's a 5. There's no one that thinks he's not in the top 2. Anyway.
Hey.
I think we get to Bird, so let's do 5. You have Bird at 5 too?
I do.
Okay. Here's my thing on Bird. I'm going to go on a long thing on Bird for a second. This was a really unfortunate thing that Larry Bird was born when he was. If Larry Bird played now, the way the game is played and the way medical science has improved, Larry Bird's peak stats are better than LeBron's, which will make some young people who are listening to this podcast head explode. He was a better shooter. He was a better passer. He was a better playmaker. Not as good of a defender, but passable and not bad. He would shoot 12 threes a game if he played now. He would be like Luka Doncic on steroids. And the deal is his prime gets cut way short. And so, look, I know you're going to have him above LeBron, and he's your favorite player of all time, and we'll give you a pass on that. But LeBron is like doubling him in every meaningful statistic. And it's just not, for a career, it's not really that close. But I honestly think peak Larry Bird is the best player of all time.
I think Bird, again, I think he's, crossing sports here. He is the Mickey Mantle of basketball. And I think
the what if.
The if Mickey Mantle would have been healthy, I mean, he literally got hurt his rookie season. And Larry Bird, not only did he have a terrible back, but he had a finger that was crooked, that he broke really bad on his shooting hand, And so, I mean, that's the thing we don't know is how good would Bird have been if he would have stayed healthy and been healthy for another 5-6 years.
Yeah. Well, and that's, again, I honestly believe if you put him in this era, we're talking about him right now as the best player of all time. Unfortunately, his statistical resume doesn't get there. Just doesn't. It's like a 7-year prime. LeBron is on like year 18 of his prime. The guy would have won the MVP again this year if he hadn't gotten hurt. It's year 19. But that's because he spends millions of dollars a year on his body. And if Larry Bird could have done the same, probably having a different discussion. So I wanted to make a caveat there. Just some raw stuff. 9 first-team NBA, all NBAs. It's the 80s. 3 MVPs, 2 Finals MVPs. 3-time champion. Probably could have won 1 or 2 more. Some injury stuff with him and McHale kept them from winning 1 or 2 more probably. And the Lakers. That's the other thing about Jordan. If you want to knock Jordan, there is no great rival. He beat a lot of good players. He did not beat anybody on this list except a worn down Magic Johnson in 90. He beat some nice teams, but sorry, Clyde Drexler, Supersonics, Karl Malone and John Stockton, okay, fine. I mean, this is why if you ever want to make the argument for LeBron to be number 1, beating that Warriors team down 3-1, that's a better title than any of the ones Jordan won. But anyway, moving on. Who you got for 4?
For 4, I've got Bill Russell.
Okay.
To me, this is a winning stat. I mean, the best winner in NBA history, 11 finals. It's hard to argue with that. Basically, Tim Duncan before Tim Duncan. I've never watched Bill Russell do anything in my life, so I'm gonna defer to you. I mean, I can probably talk about his golf game about as intelligently as I can talk about his basketball career. 4.478 MVP shares, which is way up there on the list. And that was my only thing to add with Bird, 5.6. That's like 3rd on that list. He only played for 12 years. So obviously LeBron's already played for 6 more years than he has. So if you stretch that out, it's going to look insane. But Russell, it's the winning, and that's about all I've got.
Here's all you need to know. And I have Russell 4th also. Here's all you need to know. Russell, because he played with Wilt, only made 3 first-team All-NBAs. Wilt made 7. But in multiple years, Russell was 2nd-team All-NBA and the NBA MVP because the stats were always going to favor Wilt. But basically anybody that was voting clearly felt that Russell was more valuable to his team than Wilt was. And so he won MVPs even when he wasn't first-team All-NBA. And that doesn't really happen. I mean, they were the 2 best players in the NBA for Dad. How long? I don't know. A long time. So yeah.
So when I started thinking about this list just in my head before I looked at any stats or anything, I clearly had Russell in the top 10. And then I started looking at some other stuff. I mean, he played with 5 Hall of Fame guys. 5 guys that are in the Hall of Fame, which when I think about Russell and I look at his stats, he was to the Celtics what Dennis Rodman was to the Bulls.
He was their best player.
Maybe, but he couldn't score. He wasn't a good scorer. He couldn't shoot free throws at all. Terrible free throw shooter. He was a tremendous defensive player.
And rebounder.
Yeah.
23.
But again, to me, if you're going to get in the top 10 greatest players of all time, you need to score more than he did. And be more, and it's not just about the scoring, it's that he wasn't an offensive threat. So my guess is if you would watch film of Russell, most of his scoring was dunks, and a lot of it was off offensive rebounds, which is also similar. Now I'm not trying to say that Dennis Rodman was as good as Bill Russell. I'm saying they were similar types of players.
Sure, but Rodman was scoring like 5 points a game. Russell scored 15 points a game for his career. That's not nothing.
I understand that, but Russell was also bigger than most centers he was playing against as well.
Sure.
So that's just I've got you talk about guys that didn't make the cut. He was one of the guys just in the like 11, 12, 13 area for me. If he would have scored, like I want to look at Russell's shooting percentage. His shooting percentage, 44.2. Is that right?
Yeah.
44%. I mean, again, that's not good for a center. That's bad for a center. When you look at Hakeem, 51.2, Shaq, 58.2, Wilt, 54, Kareem, 55.9, Duncan, 50.6. And then you got Russell at 44%. So anyway, that's just why I didn't have him on my list.
And that's fair. And that's one of those, it's a hard one. But my list, as you can see, is quite a bit about winning, and any literature that I have read and podcasts I have listened to, basically, he is universally, what's the word?
Revered?
Revered. I was going to say reviled, and that's not the word I'm looking for.
That's Dad's feelings on LeBron.
The ultimate winner. And the guy that willed them to win all those games. And that's where the Dennis Rodman comparison, get that all the way out of here. And again, this is where it's very subjective. Like, Russell's statistical comparisons to Wilt are hilarious. They're not close. The guy that I'm going to have third, Kareem, again, not close. But if he was winning MVPs over Wilt Chamberlain scoring 30-some and 20-some, had to be real reasons for that. And again, none of us were there. Dad, you weren't really alive for this either, were you? No. I
was pretty young, but I do know, guys on his team, John Havlicek, JoJo White, Bill Sharman, Tommy Heinsohn. I mean, the guy, and again, those are names that you probably don't know a lot of those names, but those guys are all in the Hall of Fame. And, he didn't, I mean, who knows? He didn't have to score a lot because he played with a lot of scorers. So maybe he could have scored a lot more. But again, the thing that jumps out for me from a scoring perspective, for a center, his free throw percentage or field goal percentage just really not good.
See, to me, though, you can't really penalize him for having good teammates. You could make the same argument about like the 87, 88 Celtics, where there's 5 Hall of Famers on those teams as well.
Yeah, it's why your argument about LeBron stinks, because all the guys on this list ended up being on teams with multiple Hall of Famers. Like, look at this list. We don't put Barkley anywhere near this list because Barkley didn't win, because Barkley never played with anybody the caliber that's on this list. Whereas Jordan gets Pippen immediately, who's in the honorable mention of this list, or he's probably low 20s. And Horace Grant and Dennis Rodman. I mean, the guys ended up on his team. Bird immediately gets McHale and Parrish, and he has Danny Ainge, and he has Dennis Johnson, and he didn't. Magic gets drafted onto a team that has Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then James Worthy comes, and Michael Cooper, who's about to get in the Hall of Fame, and probably shouldn't be, but he's about to anyways. Sure, though they didn't search a title, they didn't have to. They're playing with Hall of Famers all over the place. So this is the deal with these lists. We've had this conversation before, me and you, Dad. The only guys that get on this list are guys that get lucky and they get teammates somehow. Like Kobe lucks into Shaq being unhappy in Orlando, and Shaq lucks into Kobe becoming a generational player. And then Kobe lucks into Memphis being so stupid to give him Pau Gasol, because if he never gets another teammate of that quality, we end up thinking of Kobe kind of like we think of Allen Iverson as this super selfish, surly guy who didn't win anything on his own. And so this list it's tricky because all these guys were really blessed. It's like we have Wilt way down the list, where it's like, what if Wilt played with all those guys in the Celtics? We probably think Wilt is the greatest player of all time. And so part of it is situation too, for sure.
So, and to kind of piggyback on this is going to take me like 5 minutes to read, but I want to read you a roster from 2005, 2006. I'm going to leave one player off. I want you to ask or predict how good their record's going to be. All right. Martinez, Andreas Silvigis, Drew Gooden, Stephen Graham, Zendon Hamilton, Alan Henderson, Larry Hughes, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Luke Jackson, Damon Jones, Danielle Marshall, Ronald Murray, Ira Newby, Sasha Pavlovic, Eric Snow, Anderson Varejao, Mike Wilkes.
That team went to the finals.
That's LeBron's Cavaliers,
right? They beat the Pistons, who just got done dismantling Kobe and Shaq the year before in the finals.
So I'm going to go back to what I said before these first two, because I definitely qualified this. It's because I don't like these guys. This is the beauty of a subjective list, is that always enters in. It just does. And so anyway, when we get to the top two, I'll explain more why I have those guys.
Oh, yeah. All right. So finish up.
One final note: if anyone that actually listens to this podcast and makes it into hour 3 that we're in right now, if you can pronounce number 15 on the 2005-2006 Cavs roster and send it to me, I will send it.
Venmo.
Cash App right now.
Okay, Dad, who you got for number 3?
Well, I think we probably all have the same guy at number 3.
Kareem.
And it's Kareem. Yeah. And So I don't tend to put centers high on this list, and here's why: is because centers are so dependent on their teammates to get them the ball, and they don't handle the ball much. But here's the deal with Kareem: he was the most dominant player ever at any level. Never lost a high school game.
Never lost.
He lost one college game because he was sick, and then went to the NBA and had everybody knew what he was going to do every time he got the ball, and they still could not stop him. And that hook shot was just unbelievable. So yeah.
Look, for an entire decade, he was the best player in the NBA.
Yep.
Kind of irrefutable. Now, was it a pretty crappy decade of the NBA? Yeah, it was. The 70s were not a lot. The NBA needed saving by the time the 70s were over, and in comes Magic and Bird, and we have it. But six MVPs. He's the all-time leader in points. That's going to end if LeBron stays healthy, but for now, he's there. 2-time Finals MVP, 6 championships, 10 All-NBA first. 5 seconds. That's 15 All-NBAs. He was unstoppable. We all know this. And yes, a winner forever. And another guy that, like, let's say he doesn't grow up, he comes a little later. He doesn't have to stay in college as long. You just add up more NBA stats.
He would have been a star right out of high school.
Yes, immediately. And
didn't even get to play college his freshman year.
Yeah, because it's a little weird. I mean, it feels like a long time ago, and it wasn't. But so yeah, there's not a lot more to say about him. He's not an exciting guy. He's done a lot socially. But he was not someone people loved watching because he wasn't exciting. He was not an exciting personality. He's just kind of a ho-hum. Here's your 30 and 15 every night. Kind of the Tim Duncan of the 70s, really. But more dominant. So
second all time in all NBA selections, third all time in MVP shares. So that's really literally all I had to add.
Yeah, he's where he's supposed to be, third-ish.
Yeah.
The two guys Dad has in front of him, we can argue about, but they're Dad's guys. So, all right, Dad, why don't you just give us your last two and talk for a while about Magic and Bird, because we know you love them, and then Kyle and I will go and the real number 1 and 2.
You already mentioned, Jesse, why I put these guys 1 and 2. One of the big reasons is a lot of people think Michael Jordan saved the NBA, and that's not true. It was Bird and Magic. The NBA was on the verge of bankruptcy, and these two guys came in. What puts them 1 and 2 for me is several things. First of all, it was both of their passion. Bird number 1, Magic number 2. But this is another one of my pairs because these two they're inseparable. And again, Bird at his peak, I think that's what makes him the best player of all time for me, is that at his peak, he was good at everything. And the thing to me that sets Bird and Magic apart is that they made everybody who played with them better. And Larry Bird one time scored 30-some points, and every shot he took was left-handed. I was going to say something else. I mean, they just elevated everybody's level of play. And the other thing I love about these two is that they were the most ferocious competitors, and yet they're like best friends. And so I just think they're both good people who have overcome adversity. I love the fact that Magic has this just incredible outlook on life, even though, he's had some tough things happen in his life, and just the passion that they played with. So I'm aware, I watched these guys when I was playing, and they shaped, not that I'm not trying to compare myself to them, but they shaped the way I played, and because they both just had this incredible will to win. And I think that also was similar of Michael Jordan. That is the one thing I really love about Michael Jordan, is that he just was going to do whatever it took to win. So anyway, these are just my two favorite players of all time. And so this is I know it's very subjective, but Bird to basketball is what Sandy Koufax was to baseball. When he was healthy, I would take him number 1 every time, hands down, above LeBron, above Michael. When he was healthy, he was the guy. So there you go. Right or wrong or indifferent, that's what I think.
Oh, wrong, but anyhow, that's okay. Because surprise submission, J.R. Smith, 1 and 2. Just kidding.
You got me. How can I even argue that?
Yeah. So Kyle and I are the same. My LeBron is tilted a little bit. So who do you want to start with, Kyle, MJ or LeBron? Because these are our guys.
Let's go LeBron first.
All right, here's the deal. I'm just going to break it down really simple for you. There's two ways you can have Kobe above LeBron. A, you didn't watch the games and you just looked at the stats. And then you got a head injury when you looked at the stats and you didn't look at most of the stats. And then you can't add very well. That's one way. And the second way is the way Dad has LeBron at 5. You don't like his politics and how vocal he is about stuff. And so you hate him. And so your hate has guided where you put him on the list. Now 4 is fine. That's fine. But if you put Kobe up there in the top 3 and you put LeBron down here somewhere, it's because you don't understand basketball, you don't watch basketball, or you just hate LeBron. It's one of those 3 things. And I understand most people listening to this podcast aren't going to love that I just said all those things. But look, LeBron is number 1 all time in win shares and playoff win shares. He's going to end number 1 all time in points. He's already number 1 all time in playoff points. He's in the top 5 of every statistical metric that measures value, that measures how much he's helped his team win. It's an unassailable resume, except that people don't like him. And I understand some of it. He's not a Republicans buy sneakers too guy like Jordan was. He is very much himself. And I understand how that rubs some people the wrong way. He's also unequivocally the best player since Jordan. It's not close. And all of you Kobe people need to go take a look at some books and some YouTube clips and some whole bunch of stuff, because get out of here with this. Here's LeBron's resume. Sorry, Kyle. I'm just going and going here.
It's fun.
He's built an incredible off-the-court legacy of sending kids to college and building schools, which is cool, but that is not what matters on this list. 13 All-NBA first teams. 13. 2 seconds, and a third when he got hurt. He's been the MVP 4 times. He's been the finals MVP 4 times. He's been the best player on all 4 finals teams. We know this. He's also been to the finals 6 more times, which is more than anyone on this list except Bill Russell.
You really think he was the best team on that Cavaliers team? Or the best player?
It was him or Pavlovich. It was close.
Yeah, okay.
No, it was number 15.
Yeah, the guy we can't pronounce that we've never heard of before. He's Larry Bird, maybe a notch below, for 2 times as long. He played the best basketball game I've ever seen anyone play ever, and lost because of J.R. Smith. He went into, you guys need, anyone who wants to go watch a great game, he goes into Golden State in the first game of the finals, in which Golden State has Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, amongst others. He has Kevin Love, who was good 5 years before that game. And he scores 50-some points and basically beats the Warriors by himself, except this guy's on his team. And he thinks the game is tied when he pulls down a rebound that he could have shot a layup to win the game. Or he thinks that they're winning, and the game is actually tied. He is in the top tier of assists all time. He's closing in on the top tier of rebounds all time. He's going to be the all-time points leader. He is like, there are certain metrics like win shares in the playoffs where he's like 20 above everyone else and he has 70 some. Like, the numbers are staggering, and then the eye test backs it up. So that's why LeBron is 2 for me. Part of that is bias. I've gotten to watch him my whole life. He's unbelievable. And it's another thing where he's the most hyped athlete of all time and somehow lived up to the hype, which is really difficult. You can not like his politics, but he's been married to the same person for 20 years. There are no scandals. There is nothing that would suggest to you that he is Michael Jordan, who's been married 3 times, or Magic Johnson, who had some off the court stuff that led to some of the hard stuff that he had to deal with. He is politically divisive, but on a personal level, you give me him all the time over Kobe, speaking of off the court stuff, Jordan, Magic, all those guys. So that's my LeBron opus. He's still not number 1 for me. So Kyle, go ahead.
So I don't have a ton to add to that since that was like a 45-minute monologue. But I have basically 2 sentences written for each of these. So for Jordan, I have GOAT, and then for LeBron, complaining GOAT.
It's true.
And for anyone who's ever watched basketball with me, I am not a Team LeBron guy. It has nothing to do with politics or off-the-court stuff at all. I hate watching his teams. I hate watching every team that he's ever played on, not because it's not amazing to watch, because it's actually the best basketball we're probably going to watch in today's NBA. It's just that can't handle the constant complaining, and I'm kind of Team Curry, Durant, whatever, not Harden.
No, we're not Team Harden.
Not at all. But it's really hard to dispute the stats and the longevity already. I mean, he's already first in MVP shares and by a fairly significant amount. Is at 8.8. He's up there in all NBA votes. If not, I think he might actually be first. I can't find my stats. He's first. And some of those teams are just horrendous. And you had mentioned that you kind of discounted him for jumping around the NBA. I think Curry is going to be the last star that we see that spends an entire career on the same team. And
it's sad.
To me, though, LeBron, I can't fault him at all for leaving because it was a failure in ownership. It would be one thing if Dan Gilbert had succeeded in bringing him legit talent and it wasn't Cleveland.
Daniel Gibson wasn't good enough for you?
I mean,
Mo Williams is the second banana. Not
truly,
good enough.
Can you name the best player that he played with his first stint on the Cavs?
It's Mo Williams.
It's literally Mo Williams.
Maybe Antoine Jameson at the end of his career.
Anderson Varejao was literally in the conversation.
Maybe.
He just signed his contract with the Cavs. He hasn't played in the league in 4 years. LeBron is still at an MVP level. I mean, it's really unassailable, in my opinion, even though I can't stand watching the guy.
The thing that surprises me a little bit, I mean, I knew you guys would have these guys 1, 2, and you know, and it's all good. The thing that does surprise me a little bit, you know, purely from a basketball standpoint, the thing that puts LeBron ahead of MJ for me, and you know, obviously they never played against each other, but I think LeBron could have guarded Michael Jordan. I don't think Michael Jordan could have guarded LeBron. I mean, when I say guarded, I think LeBron could have stopped Michael Jordan. He's bigger. He's as athletic. I just don't think Michael could have guarded LeBron. He's too strong. He's too fast.
We play a different position, really. I mean Scottie Pippen would have guarded.
Basically, a power forward and
but it goes back to me what separates LeBron, and I think ultimately, when you look back, we're going to say that LeBron James was the greatest basketball player of all time, simply because he would be, no matter what position he played, he would probably be the best at it.
So what you want us to do is this.
No, I don't, because I still would argue that if healthy, Larry Bird is better than all of them. And I say that because I don't care who Jordan's teammates were, he never beat Bird's Celtics.
But they're not in the same era.
Well, they played against each other quite a bit.
Well, yeah, when Jordan, okay, but you're talking about Jordan's like first 3 or 4 years. He has no Pippen, he has no Horace Grant. Those teams were hilariously bad.
I understand that. But in his prime, Bird, again, if I'm building a team and I've got the first pick and I've got all those guys in their prime, I'm still taking Larry Bird. And
we accept that answer. That's the fun part of these lists, is that you can do it different ways.
It is.
Me, MJ's career beats everyone.
Well, and to me, you've really got to get into, I'm big into analytics, so I think you've really got to get into the analytics with the MJ-LeBron debate. So you've got the box plus minus, you've got VORP, you've got all this. So I like the rings plus minus. So if you take Jordan's rings and you put them in a box, and you take LeBron's rings and you put them in a box and you shake that box a little bit, who's louder?
Jordan's is louder than Bird's and Magic's and LeBron's.
Yep.
Not Russell's, though, but we can't have him
on. But again, who did Bird and Magic have to face every time they were at the finals? Each other. And so the fact that they got there for how many straight years is pretty amazing. The other thing for me,
they were by far the best team in their conference for that entire decade. Both of them were.
Right. Again, for me, when I look purely at statistics, you know, again, if Bird would have shot more threes, and again, Jordan didn't shoot a lot of threes either, but, you know, more rebounds per game and more assists per game than Jordan. You know, again,
it's the will to win for me that pushes MJ in front of everyone. LeBron is more gifted than Michael Jordan was. He is. He's the most gifted player I think I've ever seen. He's more gifted than Bird. Bird's more skilled. But
I mean, Bird dives for a loose ball, breaks his face, and comes back. And
no, it's incredible. I was talking to my friend Scott about that the other day. Maybe I was talking to you. Was it you that I was talking to about? I think it might have been. No, it was my friend Scott because he knew we were doing this podcast. Hi, Scott. We love you. But I constructed this list because I care a lot about winning. And I told you, I think Larry Bird is number one on my list if he plays now and plays 15, 20 years. But to me, Michael Jordan demoralized all the people he played against. And maybe it's because he didn't have a peer when he played. Maybe that's true. But he basically ruined the careers. And Hakeem probably doesn't get on this list if Michael Jordan doesn't take a year and a half off because they don't win those championships probably. And so he's number one for me. It's not forever for me. If LeBron would win a couple more championships and then has the sixth plus a huge statistical advantage, I don't know.
How many finals has LeBron played in?
10. It's 4 and 6.
4 and 6.
Jordan's 6-0. So this is the great argument. Like I heard an argument the other day about this is before Brady won the last one that like someone would rather have Joe Montana, who was undefeated, than Brady, who was like 6-2, and that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Would you rather get 5th than 2nd?
Yeah, like okay, so you got bounced earlier in the playoffs. You weren't very good some years. Like that's better than because like MJ did lose in the first round a number of times and missed the playoffs for a significant amount of the early part of his Bulls career, a few years at least. And LeBron pretty much came in, took the worst team in the league, and within a couple years was real contenders, and then dragged that team that, holy smokes. I mean, it's the worst finals team you've ever seen to the finals as a really young player, like 22 years old. It's incredible.
Well, and it speaks to the parity in the NBA right now. Say what you will about how soft you want to say it is, and you don't like three-point shooting and all of that. I don't either, but there's still a ton more talent than, say, the early 2000s. That was just like a desert. And right before Bird and Magic, I mean, there were some serious droughts within the talent. So the fact that LeBron has been to that many, to me, is, you could say it's an indictment compared to Jordan, but to me, it's him dragging really bad teams.
Jordan never played a team like the Warriors in the finals. Not even close. And he would have beat them, but I don't think so. But you look, there's the golden eras of basketball. It's the 80s, and honestly, it's probably right now as far as talent and Hall of Fame level players. So that gets us to, Dad, do you have some people you want to mention as almost making your top 10? Because I know we both do, as we're now in – this is the longest podcast we've ever done.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously Bill Russell was right there for me, and because of the fact that I think the rest of his team just knew he was back there, and I think he just was such a good defensive player that I think it gave the rest of his team just a lot of confidence, and just knowing he was present back there by the basket. Jerry West is another guy for me. The knock on Jerry West is that he only won one NBA championship. Was there several times, but tremendous player. Curry just, has got to be getting close to, the guy is just unbelievable. And especially for his size. Let's see.
Also ruined youth basketball, but that's not really his fault.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are the guys that kind of were close to my list.
You want to give your kind of next group and see what Dad thinks of it, and I'll give mine too.
Sure. I mean, the guys that I left off that you've mentioned, I mean, Shaq, Robertson, Moses Malone, Curry, Jerry West, but guys that were close for me, I mean, Curry definitely, I think, but Chris Paul, I think, is in the stratosphere, is one of the best point guards I've ever seen play, and I think by the end of his career, if he can get a final in Phoenix, is going to be on this list. Barkley, had he gotten a final, I think is on this list, or at least close. I think Durant will mosey onto this list at some point. Is
That's the other guy I forgot to mention.
If he stays healthy, his stats and his resume in the playoffs is going to be tough to beat.
I know he's been mentioned, but J.R. Smith. I think Moses Malone, but again, I can't talk about him at all. Dirk is someone that we've talked about a bit that is really close. KG as well.
He's in the teens somewhere.
Yeah, I don't want to steal all yours if you've got other ones. So
I have Oscar, West, Chris Paul, Barkley, Dirk, Moses Malone. I can't read this one. But I think active players wise, you're looking at Curry and Durant as kind of surefire, could crack the top 10. You can't guarantee anything. Curry's a little old than people think, but that's going to play for a while, his shooting ability. So he could probably play. I mean, Del Curry played for a long, long time, and he wasn't nearly the player that Steph Curry is. So
Karl
Malone has to probably be mentioned as the second all-time leading scorer, but it's one of those deals. I was talking to him about this. We've both played with guys that you go, wow, that guy, it's baseball for us, but look at the stats that guy puts up in all these regular season games. Like, wow, what a masher. We play with pitchers and hitters like that, and then the bright lights turn on, and it's like, yeah, you don't want that guy on your team. You can't win with him. And Karl Malone was that guy. I mean, he played with another Hall of Famer his whole career, and they managed to win exactly this many finals.
They basically were a two-man team.
Sure, but LeBron took one-man teams to the finals.
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement with you.
But he won 2 MVPs. He's going to finish third all time in scoring because LeBron's going to pass him soon. But, there are guys like that. Carmelo is like Karl Malone light, where it's like, great, you're not going to win with that guy. You're just not.
So is Dr. J somebody that was on?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Elgin Baylor, by the way, who recently passed. If you go back and look at some of his seasons, it's staggering, actually.
43% field goal percentage, though.
Sure, but it's a different era. I mean, if you go back and look at the percentages of most of the guard forwards of those eras, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, which is another thing that Oscar Robertson's almost 49%.
Yeah. So and then you've got guys that it's impossible to deal with, like George Mikan and Bob Pettit and guys like that.
Kuzi.
Again, I think one guy that doesn't get enough love is Isaiah Thomas, actually.
Pippen, maybe.
And Scottie Pippen, who he's not ever going to end up on a top 10 list because he didn't deserve to be. But him and Jordan out on the wing defending people just swallowed up the floor. And it was a perfect second banana.
And speaking of guys that we talked a lot about this with Larry Bird, if Bill Walton stays healthy his entire career and doesn't just wander into deserts doing drugs, we might have a whole different story.
It's a different.
Yeah, you talk about a guy, that Trailblazers team that just destroyed the 76ers.
Yeah.
Name anybody else on that team.
Clifford Robinson. It's a joke.
Jeff Petrie, Maurice Lucas, Hollins, Lionel Hollins. There was nobody on that team that ever was a significant player in the NBA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One other guy I did want to mention, and speaking of different eras, is if Steve Nash played today and shot 6 more threes a game, could potentially be talking about.
And he also had health
list.
stuff that probably gets fixed better. He did win consecutive MVPs when Kobe Bryant was at his absolute apex. So that's something that should be mentioned. All right. That was a lot. You want to do your
the full?
Yeah, there's the board. I don't ever know how to move because of the inverse thing. All right. Do you want to do your quick segments here? Got a thing you hate?
Sure.
Okay.
So, things I hate, or the thing I hate. I hate the overemphasis on sports for young kids. I hate all the travel ball and I'm talking about kids that are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I hate the fact that parents think they're actually spending time with their children when they're sitting watching ball games. I hate the fact that it makes children think that they're the most important thing in the world when they're not. So yeah, I really struggle with that. And you guys know, growing up, we played a lot of ball together, and we stayed right in Middlebury, and I don't think it hurt you guys too much as ball players. But the thing I hate the most is that everybody's trying to raise the next Michael Jordan or, whatever, instead of raising good people. And I think our society is really suffering because of that. And, as your father, I'm way more proud of the people that you turned out to be than any of the accolades that you had on the baseball diamond or any other sporting event. And so, yeah, I think our society we're doing our children a grave disservice by spending all this money and all this time trying to create these great athletes. So that's the one thing that I hate.
I have to go get all my Little League trophies off the dresser now. Just kidding. I think they're in storage at Kyle's house.
They are. They need to go, by the way. They've got to get out of there.
I might have actually thrown some of them away, but
It's
whatever.
Okay. It's okay.
If you didn't, I'm about to.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. You got a family fiasco for us, so you'll hold your breath on this one.
So I gotta tell 3 P stories. Is that okay if I tell P stories on your podcast?
Sure. I told someone at Kyle's wedding, I think.
Okay. So I'll start with the youngest of the 3 of us. And so Kyle was a bit of a sleepwalker when he was a kid. And I always stayed up late because your mother worked evenings and I would stay up till she got home. So one night I'm working on baseball cards and I hear water running in Jesse's room. And so I go in the room and there's Kyle. He's asleep, but he's standing there peeing in Jesse's box of newspaper clippings. So
Cut things out.
the next night, it's the same situation, and I hear water running in the living room.
I was awake for this one.
Yeah, and there's Kyle standing there again, sound asleep, but peeing on the coffee table right in front of the couch. So the next night, I hear water running and then dripping. I thought, oh boy.
This is the one I was awake for.
Yeah. So our stairs in the house we were living in, they were an open stairway. And so Kyle was standing at the top of the steps, peeing about halfway down the steps. It was hitting the step and then dripping down on the living room floor.
That's a strong flow right there. You're welcome.
Yeah. It was. So anyway, and he was sound asleep all 3 times, which was pretty amazing.
I still do that every single night.
Do you? So then Jesse's pee story is one time when we were still living in the red house on Cottage Avenue, I was out talking to our pastor, and Jesse and I were out playing ball, and Jesse just walks over to where we're standing, drops his shorts, and proceeds to almost pee on our pastor's shoes.
Oh, yes.
It was so awesome. And I'm sitting there cracking up. I just thought it was hilarious, which I was also laughing when you were doing your thing too, Kyle. But so anyway, since I told one on you guys, when my brother and I were young, I mean, when I say young, I was probably in junior high. He was in high school. Our bedrooms were upstairs in our house. And those were the only 2 rooms in the upstairs of our house. And we had to walk all the way down the steps and across the house to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. So we got this brilliant idea. It was that we would just open the window and pee out the screen. And so we did this all winter because, of course, winter, it was cold in the house and we didn't want to get out of bed and walk downstairs. So that when summer rolled around, my mom went up to do something in our room, and she's just like, what is that smell? And she found out we'd been peeing out the screen all winter. So that came to a very quick halt.
Yeah.
Imagine.
I'd love to see Erna let you have it about that.
So anyway,
Amazing.
That's my family fiasco.
All right. Do you have anything to recommend before we end what has now turned into a remarkably long podcast?
No, not for your listeners, because they would have absolutely no interest in what I watch or do. So
yeah,
well,
he loves Sherlock Holmes.
You know what? I'm a pastor, for those of you who don't know that are listening, and I'm reading a book right now that's called Kingdom Man Rising. And it's
That's
by a
3
guy
words?
named, what?
3 words?
Kingdom Man Rising. Yeah, 3 words.
Okay.
It's by a guy named Tony Evans. If you don't know who Tony Evans is, he's a pastor of a church in Dallas. Incredible guy. But the opening line of the book is, you know you're a kingdom man when your foot hits the floor in the morning and the devil says, oh crap, he's up. And I just thought that was a really great line. So I would recommend that book, Kingdom Man Rising. Really excellent.
All right.
And it was written, Tony Evans was married for 40 some years, and this book was written within 6 months after his wife passed away. So anyway, powerful stuff.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Mm-hmm.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah. Maybe we can convince you to move LeBron and MJ up the list.
Well, it wouldn't take much.
All right. Well, we'll have you on again at some point, maybe when we need some baseball insight. But yeah.
Sounds good.
We miss you. Girls
Yeah.
and our two girls and I are actually flying out to Iowa in about 10 days. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah. We're trying to talk Kyle into coming to Iowa then too. So
yeah, he's busy. I already talked to him about it, but
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Love you guys.
Love you too.
Love you.
Bye, friends.